No. Good evening. I'd like to begin with the territorial acknowledgement. School District 72 operates on the traditional territories of the Lakota, Klahoose, and Comox First Nations. And we honor our relationship with these First Nations, the Homolko First Nation, and all other First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who reside in these territories. I'd like to call our meeting to order. I've never been able to actually bang a gavel before, except in Rotary, so I am thoroughly enjoying. Did I do that? Well, okay. So I'd like to call to order the February meeting of the School District 72 Board of Trustees and just share a few opening remarks in light of my recent return from the Provincial Council for the BC Schools Trustees Association, the BCSTA. I spent actually the last weekend at the SFU WASC Center for Dialogue. And for anyone who hasn't been there, it's the closest you'll ever come to feeling like you're part of the United Nations. It's the most remarkable venue for dialogue. Provincial Council draws together one representative from each of the 60 school districts within the province. And I was very honored to have SD 72 as the placard behind which I sat. It reminded me that throughout this very diverse areas of our province, each month school boards meet to develop strategic plans and find ways to best promote achievements of their students. And in existence since 1987, the body meets 3 times a year, generally in October, February, and again during the April AGM. And it was formed to ensure that the interests of all boards are represented in the governance of the BCSTA and to facilitate an ongoing dialogue around issues facing the association and its member boards across the province. Led by President Carolyn Brody from West Vancouver and directors and CEO Suzanne Hoffman, we shared updates from the deputy ministers, from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. We voted on motions that are brought forward by member districts, and we had opportunities to share information sessions that deepen our understanding of current issues and future pathways while developing insights that support the current BCSTA strategic plan. And I'd also like to add that I'm pleased to say that SUP trustee Allison Watson was elected to fill a vacancy created when Tracy Loeffler, and director, was elected as interim vice president. So we now have a director from Vancouver Island serving on our behalf. So with those thoughts in mind, I'd like to now turn things over to Superintendent Morrow for his opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice Chair Gus. I appreciate the very confident gavel ring there. So. And I just wanted to note today, beautiful sunny weather day, and the number of people asking for a snow day has diminished to just one, which is Associate Superintendent Mr. Sismic looking for snow day. But I did want to point out that the recent snowfall once again highlights the incredible work that our transportation team does every day, transporting safely students. And not only do our drivers transport students safely to and from schools, but they do take pride in connecting meaningfully with the children in their care. And they recognize that they are the first and last connection of our district with many of our students each day. So I did want to take a chance while the snow melts and the roads look clear to thank our drivers for their exemplary work. I also wanted to share tonight to provide the board with an update that all members of the formal leadership team in the district, which includes all principals, vice principals, management, exempt, and senior leadership team, have been participating in the anti-racism response training program. This is a program that uses a witness-centered approach to disrupting racism. This experiential Canadian-based anti-racism series has introduced all of us to the historical legacies of racism in this country. It has provided an overview of key definitions and concepts such as microaggressions, systemic racism, white fragility, and implicit bias. It is offering specific and usable tools which are equipping our leaders to support appropriate responses in order to disrupt racism and build safer and more inclusive schools and communities. I wanted to share that the leadership team started this work in the summer, and we have completed 3 of the 5 scheduled sessions. And just that point that we're deeply committed to ensuring schools and work sites are safe and supportive for all of our students and our staff. I want to update that we have had 2 meetings of the calendar committee, and that we do now have a draft calendar that will be available for the public to view that covers the next 3 school years. We will be placing these calendars on the website before the end of this week, and they will be online specifically to solicit feedback from our community. And we are asking this year that the feedback is focused on helping us ensure that we have a response to, and that we are responsive to issues that the school calendars may raise, and not just simply soliciting a yes or no, or a positive or a negative, so that we can respond to any of those concerns that may theme out. I want to point out that one change to note is that in year 2 of the 3-year calendars, year 2 and 3 of the calendars, we have moved to full professional development days to make 4 half days to provide educators with an opportunity to engage in a cycle of collaborative action to achieve better results for the students that we serve. In addition, while the next 3 years are largely similar to previous years, we are committed to engaging in deeper conversations around how schools and the resulting calendars can be reimagined to better meet the needs of students and their families. And I look forward to engaging in those conversations as we look to the future around new possibilities. Lastly, I just want to briefly mention what a pleasure it has been connecting with students over the past few weeks on behalf of the board as we listen to student feedback that will be critical to the board's work in their renewal of their strategic plan. I have deeply appreciated the thoughtful and heartfelt response of our students, and was so grateful for the chance to connect with students around their aspirations for the future and their candid feedback and ideas of how schools can be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Laurel. And it just mentioned that I've been remiss in not mentioning that there is a short production delay between the live event that you're viewing and the meeting participants. And the question and answer function is open for questions on agenda items throughout the virtual meeting. And a final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and questions will be addressed before the end of the session. And I'd also like to wish Chair Eddie a speedy recovery. She is currently the victim of one of those terrible winter colds right now. I told her to stay home and just hug herself. Place. And so if we could move to item 3, approval of the minutes of the meeting of January 31st. Okay, thank you, Trustee Harper, and I believe seconded by Trustee Hagan. And all in favor, please. Thank you. So our path, and then any business arising from the minutes. Hearing none, I'll ask for any additions or alterations to the agenda. Hearing none, if we could have the approval of the standing agenda. Thank you, Trustee Gladish. And Trustee Briggs, second. And all in favor, please. Thank you. And that is carried. And so moving on to board decisions from the February 28th meeting. I guess that would come to me, wouldn't it? Yes. We are in the middle of a meeting, and we have been dealing with issues dealing with personnel, and we will return to that meeting following this. Thank you. On to correspondence. Okay. Hearing none, any public submissions? It's going much more quickly than the confidential meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, agenda submissions. On to educational submissions. Okay, and now under electorate and board matters, we'll turn things over to Secretary Treasurer Patrick. And this is regarding the budget bylaw and then the 2022-23 operating budget. Yeah,
Yes, well, tonight's a big thing. Tonight we're gonna look for the board to approve the amended budget of our fiscal year. So we do two budgets each year. We'll do a preliminary budget in the spring that are based on estimates for enrollment estimates, which then drive cost estimates. It's at that opportunity where we'll engage stakeholders, we'll ask for feedback, and we'll bring a series of recommendations for budget changes, whether that's adds or reductions to the board. And that kind of sets the bigger changes for the year and for the board. But of course, we're only funded based on what actually we get. So when students arrive in September, we adjust our support costs, our teaching costs up or down to reflect that need there. And it's those confirmed numbers that we then start to build into this budget. So typically the preliminary budgets where the feedback comes, the amended budget is really just updating costs. And there were a lot of updated costs between the preliminary and the final budget this year. So I've got a lot to say, and so I'll try not to get caught too much in the details with this one. So for starters, what you have in your package, we have updated it. So we have a new interim assistant secretary who's been working hard on this. Like right up to today, we were still making some finalized changes, but we wanted to make sure that the board had something in your package. There were small changes, not significant changes, and I think it'll be about $100,000 change. So what we'll be asking the board to pass and support is the copy that I handed out just today right now, as well as what we'll speak to up on the board. So we have different components of the budget. The official budget has the operating grants and the operating budget. It's got a special purpose fund budget and it has a capital budget in. But the real budget that impacts the decisions of the board is the operating budget. And we have this chart that we use. Again, it's got lots of numbers. I tried something a little different this year. We've got the salmon color column. And what we've really done here is shown the difference between the preliminary and the final budget. And for the changes between the two, the biggest change has been the labor settlement cost. So the ministry does fund it, so you'll see costs go up for what the labor settlement was, and then you'll also see some other minor changes. So in teachers, so just kind of go through some costing differences. So for teachers, 4% increase has gone up 1.2 million. Most of that cost increase was the labor settlement. We've had about 3 FTE positions that increased in staffing. On the QP side, that's 6%, but the wage increase in labor settlement was really about half that. And they had about a 7 FTE increase in educational assistants. As you go down administrative staff, again, you should expect to see about 4% predominantly for the labor settlement, but this one's got 5. And the impact, the reason for that this year is we have had some turnover. We've had to bring in some additional supports, have some overlap training time, so we've built some of those costs in. Kind of going down, I'm not going to speak about things that hadn't changed too much. Teacher sick leave. So teacher sick leave was a big one last year. We realized mid-year that we were running well over our costs, and at that time, for the final budget of last year, the board doubled. We doubled our sick budget for sick costs. What we found by the time we got to the preliminary is that we didn't need quite that much, so we actually scaled it back from $1 million to an increase of only $500,000. Looking at costs this year, it looks to be fairly accurately adjusted. What we have done, that $50,000, it's really just update wages because wages have gone up about that much. So that's a big risk for the board. It had a big impact last year. It was part of a $2 million draw on deficit, but this year I feel like we're pretty good. We'll continue to monitor, and of course, any major illnesses that go around could impact that. And then the benefits. So the benefits are up quite a bit, and quite a bit more than what I had expected. Of course, the benefits are going to go up by wages. There's wage sensitive benefits and non-wage sensitive benefits, but inflation is impacting everything. We've had a lot of flat rate benefit costs go up substantially. This is a portion that's covered by the board. In some cases, staff will cover a portion of. But things like WorkSafe have gone up quite a bit, like 10%. Some of our extended health and dental have gone up 10% as well. So this kind of balances out. Heading down into the other services again, we don't make a lot of changes, like really from the prelim to the pre-appro whereins it should just be updates, inflationary updates and wage updates. So we shouldn't see a lot of big changes, but training and travel has had a pretty big adjustment. We had to adjust that up because of compliance requirements for training on health and safety. So when we had set the preliminary budget, we either weren't aware or didn't realize that we could get training. So we have since committed to that training because likely we have a board or body that is requiring that. So we had to build some of those costs in, so that's gone up. And the contracts, it goes up basically with our Indigenous targeted funds and other targeted funds. As the enrollment goes up, we have to, we will make sure that they get spent. That's usually, that is the account where we'll put those costs until they get spent. Lose some of the top bits. In supplies, those were just moderate adjustments, again, reflecting some of what we had found between the books and guides and moving that stuff around. So it is showing up though as a reduction. And then of course, fuel, we know the fuel rates have gone up. So we made a small adjustment to that too. So you could see the bottom line, we have increased from the preliminary to this $3.1 million. That's substantial. But again, most of that is wage related. Now the green column is what we do, the salmon column is basically just for operations. The green column is, in the past, we would take savings that the board had, and for instance, schools have about a $400,000, $383,000 savings amongst all their accounts, and they are provided the opportunity to use it year after year. And so we, the salmon column is funded out of just annual operations, whereas the green includes some of those savings getting rolled in. In the past, we used to have millions of dollars. We'd have $1.6 million worth of savings, or we call it appropriation is what the title is, built in. And those are items that would typically get identified at the year end by the board, and they would be approved by the board. But because we've had such a difficult year last year, and we really ate through emergency contingency, we didn't have a lot of savings or targeted reserves that we could, that the board could approve. So we're down to 383,000, and you can kind of see where 105 under the instructional supplies and 53,000 under books and guides. That's kind of where the school supplies have been allocated. So the amount that we're asking the board to approve is in the green column, and that's why we share both. But you can kind of see as you go up that there's not a lot of those savings or appropriations. So then when we get into revenue, so from what we have received so far, you'll see there is a $1.6 million confirmed labor settlement. So at this point, we have confirmation for labor settlement funding for 2 employee groups, but not the third. From our quick calculation, it looks like we have received full funding for it. But the settlement this year is quite complicated, and there's some things that I'm not sure how they've been identified. So we'll have to see as that goes. But we have received some of that funding, and I'll talk about the third one a little bit later. So just again, comparing the prelim to the salmon, that 1.139 on the top consolidated grant revenue. So that was a slight increase in student FTE, which basically is like 95% of our revenue. So student enrollment increase was a small part, but a large part of it was special education increases in enrollment. For the prelim to the final, we saw a lot of new students either move into the district or who had qualified for funding. And that has been reflected in those 7 EAs that were increased to support those students. Kind of heading down, there's not a lot to really note. North Island College, we really build them to cover utilities. That $48,000 change is a change in the agreement that we have had with them. School District 93, those are the Francophone students. That's just a change in the students who are attending our school. Miscellaneous fees and revenues, that $63,000 increase is a grant for that supports a part of the teaching position. And then the other big one that was really kind of a benefit is the interest income going from, we budgeted 95,000, it's gone up to $360,000. So that's quite a substantial increase. So really, the numbers that we're really wanting to look at was we know what the revenue is we have this line right here, which is the operating surplus deficit. And that's positive. That's positive. So it's funny because last year was a difficult year with a lot of reductions. And kind of with a lot of the certainties, not having a huge increase in student enrollment, which is usually how you fund your inflation. It should be, it is positive, but I should be more excited, but at this point, not quite yet. So here's the other item that I wanted to talk to is we have identified $540,000 as the cost of our QP settlement. They haven't confirmed that with us. It's not in our grant schedules. We've been asked not to budget or accrue it up in our revenues. They have basically suggested that we take it at a surplus. So that's what we're doing and that's what we're showing. So if we do receive the funding that we expect, we would actually see an operating surplus of $600,000. So there's a lot riding on that. The costs are already built in, and we have assurance that we'll have that confirmed and worked into our grants for the year end. Now, again, using those savings or appropriations, the actual operating deficit that is booked in the budget document is $319,000 deficit. But again, that's because we plan to draw $383,000 of savings, and we built in those costs, and that $540,000 is still to be received. So that's the good stuff. That's the detail. It's positive. This kind of sets the base for heading into next year, which we have provided a small enrollment that we'll also look at I cautiously optimistic should be. I'm feeling cautiously nervous though, with this one. So this is great news for this year. This should lead to a partial rebuild of the emergency contingency and get the board into a better financial position. The biggest thing that is the positive is just an understanding and a control of cost, which we seem to have a handle on. So that's that operating portion. I probably won't go through a ton of detail on here. So this is the full budget. The first statement, statement 2, combines everything. It's got amortization, it's got capital, it's got everything. And really what I'd really like to point out on there is you can see that the revenue has gone up like $4.7 million, but our costs have only gone up $1.8 million. So this is last year's final budget or amended budget to this year's amended budget. And part of why those costs have gone up so little, despite our revenues going up so much, is that's how much we've had to actually remove from the budget from last year to this year. So if you could go through some of the schedules, you will notice that there's a lot of columns that go down, and we've got more students, we've got more money, we've got more, but that's what we had to do to balance the budget. So technically, I think some positive news is we are not in a structural deficit. Even the prelim, we had budgeted with about $150,000 raw, so we're still in a small technical structural deficit. As of right now, with the budget that we're presented to you, it's not a structural deficit. Again, I won't go through. Total bylaw amount is $81 million, just about $81.1 million. So that does include the capital, includes special purpose fund. I'll head to the special purpose fund and just share that a little bit. And it's the expense side of our capital program as well. So on schedule 3A and 3B, it's got our special purpose funds. So these are targeted funds that are given to us that can only be spent on those targeted items. Lots of great programs up there. Learning Improvement Fund, Classroom Enhancement Fund, Community Links is a very large program that's there. The students, family affordability, $600,000, that's on here, so that those funds can only be spent. So that's what's on this one. The net financial impact is we can only claim revenues when we expend, so it doesn't really change or have a big impact on the consolidated budget and financials. But again, there's a lot of good programs in here. And yeah, the last page of the whole document is the capital, but again, that's only looking at the expense portion of capital. Most of our capital is assets, and which doesn't even show on here. So that's this year's budget. We are we'll be looking for the board to pass a bylaw to for the budget.
I have a question around the CUPE agreement. You said we're not being funded at this time, or we can't report what they're getting, or how is that?
So $540,000 is what we've estimated our increased cost to be. We have been told that we are getting it, but they haven't confirmed the amount.
And so are they gonna backdate it when we started paying it out?
For sure, they'll give us an annual amount because those settlements were effective July 1st of 2022. So that 540 is an annual amount for the full year. And that's what we'll look to get, and hopefully we get that or more.
So that will go back into our budget then.
Absolutely. So really what it does is it takes that operational surplus from $65,000 to $600,000. So, and it's odd that they didn't let us accrue it. We should have just put it in with the other $1.6 million and said, okay, there's ministry as an IOU to the school district. But for some reason, they didn't want us to do that. So yeah, I struggled with this a bit when I heard, as you're probably thinking, to pay for this out of your surplus, but they by the year end, the funding will be confirmed and it will be received by the school district.
So if we add that to it, let us see your accrued surplus that we have there, or whatever you want to call it, to build up that amount, so we have a bit of a buffer.
So our surplus, our emergency contingency is down about 400,000. The board policy, the governance policy is to look for it to be about 1.3 million dollars. It had been drawn down almost $1 million last year. And there is currently $1 million in unrestricted reserves. We have reduced or eliminated most of the internally restricted reserves. So we went from $4.5 million of combined reserves at the beginning of last year down to about $2.1 million at the end. So it's again, there are some financial risks, even with $1 million in surplus, because last year's mid-year cost increases were $2 million. And so the board really could use the emergency contingency and a minimum of that $1 million in unrestricted reserves to cover emergencies. And
So the grand total would be, if we added that 550 to what we're at right now.
so it would get ours from 2.1 would take us up combined reserves to 2.7.
Okay.
So it's a positive direction. Positive.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Patrick. I gather then that we will call for the motion and then have, see if there's any further discussion. And this is I'm asking someone to move that the budget bylaw for the amended annual 2023 budget in the amount of $81,189,374 be given all required readings at this meeting. And just a reminder, we need unanimous approval for 3 readings. So Trustee Harper, thank you. And Trustee Hagan for seconding. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then I'll call the question. And please raise your hand if you approve. Okay, and I see that is unanimous. Thank you. And now we need 3 readings, and each of these, I understand, requires a separate team. So Trustee Hagan for the first reading. And basically it's that the budget bylaw for the amended annual 2022-2023 budget in the amount of $81,189,374 be given first reading, and secondary for that was Trustee Briggs. Everyone else will have an opportunity. Okay. And call for the question. In favor, thank you. And now for the second reading. Trustee McMahon and Trustee Gladish as the seconder. And that is that it be given the second reading. Thank you. And calling for the question. And please raise your hand. Thank you. And again, unanimous. And then this is the third reading. And do we have, thank you, Trustee Briggs. And a seconder, please. Trustee Gladish, thank you so much. So that be passed and adopted. And so if we could please call for the question. Any opposed? All in favor? So the budget bylaw is now approved. Thank you so much for all the hard work. And so moving along to educational issues. Anything, I don't know. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to item 14A, which is enrollment forecast, and our favorite secretary treasurer again gets the floor.
Yeah, so as one budget ends, another begins, and so this is the start of the preliminary budget preparation for next year. The ministry, in order for them to tell us what kind of grants they think we're gonna get, we have to tell them how many students we think we're gonna get. So we use a program, a demographic planning program, to help us figure out what we think our students are gonna be. We send them out to schools, and our schools will apply some local knowledge. So look at in the tiny print, you can see a 61.9375. That is what we're expecting to increase. Now, you can look at the number right beside it. The ministry is expecting that we'll only go up by 9.6 students. There's a pretty big difference there. We are taking a little bit of a risk and opportunistic or optimistic risk that we'll get more students. So Beauregard, the demographic software, had us higher than the 61. And obviously the ministry has us less. So we might want to consider that when going into budget planning. We see that our financial position right now is okay with a small surplus. And again, there are ways to try to factor that in when planning. So if we don't end up getting 5,645, we potentially could get funded. What the ministry said is 5,592. So we have to be prepared for that with the final budget. For special needs FTEs, they're pretty much, we got our level 2s going up, our level 2s coming down just a little bit, our level 3s going up a bit, and our level 1 going up a bit. Indigenous Ed is relatively stable. And then you can see for the February and May enrollments, not a lot of changes planned or expected at that time. So really this is kind of the big start of the next budget, expecting to go up 62 students.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for? You?
I just had a quick one.
Yes.
Beauregard calculation, they were more than the 61?
They were.
Substantially or?
They were about 20, so not substantial, not as much of a difference as the ministry was.
Okay.
There's some reasons I think we've identified of why the ministry is so low, so we've taken that into account. Once we take that into account and address it as a district internally, then that would take the ministry increase to probably be about 32. So then we'd be about a 30 student difference from the ministry. So but either you take it based on trends. Before COVID, we were growing at a decent rate, and that definitely we had an impact at COVID. In conversation with Beauregard, we have not seemed to get as many students back as what that trend had suggested that we should prior. So we're looking for that to hopefully change as well.
Do we know where they've gone?
Well,
Just
what they
like
can
the
tell us
computer.
is they know who lives in town, but they know that they're not coming to our school. So they could be any number. They could be at the private schools. They could be at the Echo Rockland. They could be DL programs or homeschool.
Thank you. And now if you'd like to shift to 14B.
Yes.
Guiding principles for decision-making
Yeah.
budget cycle.
So unfortunately, I didn't get to this one in the earlier meeting, but to talk about the guiding principles. But the guiding principles are a document that we have asked the board to support that we'll take into our budget consultation process. And our process has been the same for quite some time. I really think for new people participating in the budget, this probably resonates a bit more. I think for people who have experienced it, they know what to expect. But Yeah, it is a way for the board to communicate to stakeholders on how and what they'd like to see without the board actually being there in an official capacity. So we do look for the board to pass a motion to support this, or if the board would like to make changes, we can make changes to it and revise it and bring it back to the board at a future board meeting.
Does anyone have questions or suggestions before approving? Okay, so if we could have a motion to basically that the board adopt guiding principles for decision-making budget cycle 2023 to 24 as presented. Thank you, Trustee Hagan, and Trustee McMahon, the second. The call for the question. Thank you. Again, approved unanimously. And we are now on to committee reports. And we have these.
Another budget. Another budget.
Oh, yes,
Next year.
sorry. The budget is just whizzing by my eyes here. This is draft.
I hope it's not leaky in the future.
14C, please, yes.
Yeah, so this is a budget schedule, and it has grown through the years. We used to utilize a budget function committee, and we have expanded it to include Indigenous advisory, student, parents, as well as we've listed a number of senior management meetings on it. So this is for presentation purposes only, just to let the board know the extent of our budget process. There are many different budget processes. As the board meets with other districts, you'll find there's different ways of doing it. This is a way that we have done it, and there's sessions in here where trustees can come and listen to what some of the feedback is and what the sentiment is. So you'll have this available to you.
Just one question for you. When we look at these different groups, does each group make its own determination in terms of who will represent its voice?
Yes, for the budget function committee, we do ask for appointees from each group. For the parents, we've had mixed results. There have been times when it's been solely PAC appointed. But we've had some years where we've had open invitation. We've had lots of non-PAC parents come as well. For the students, it's usually a leadership team. But again, it would be nice to have more representation. Again, the more people who want to talk budget, the happier I am. So it's nice to hear the voices, not just the usual voices, but other voices as well. So.
Yes, Trustee McMahon.
Pardon me, are trustees allowed to sit in on the student budget consultation group?
Yeah. Yes. The one thing that we have to be aware of and careful of with some of our sessions is that the number of adults don't outnumber the number of students. So it's one of the sensitivities that we'll just keep an eye on to see how many students attend. And we can communicate. So if you are interested, please let us know and we can monitor that and let you know.
Okay.
And I'm assuming we would participate as a invisible observer.
Observer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because, yeah, the, what the board has to say means a lot, and for both staff, stakeholders, participants, as well as parents and students. So, but you can really kind of get a feel for the needs and the changing needs through the years, just by being in the room.
Thank you. We appreciate the work and the thought that goes into creating an opportunity for so many voices to be heard and have input in our district. And now on to 15A. Okay. Eager for these committee reports. So Trustee Eddie is not able to see here. Is anyone else part of that particular? I have a few.
That's a meeting that superintendents, secretary treasurers and board chairs spend one day meeting with our own respective groups, and then the second day we meet together. So I wouldn't hazard to share what Trustee Eddie might share, but essentially it is an opportunity for all three of us to get updated on what's happening and moving with the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So while we were there, we did get updates from our new MLA of Education and Childcare, Minister Rashna and Minister Lohr from Childcare. So we did have presentations from the ministry, and we're updated as well. On that first day, where typically we spend the whole day, superintendents are separate from secretary and board chairs. In the afternoon, board chairs and superintendents spent the afternoon listening to Dr. Jerome Cranston on a presentation regarding anti-racism. So I know that both Trustee Eddie and I felt that that was a very powerful use of time and really connected. So.
Maybe if I could just add, at the provincial council, we had the opportunity to hear from Deputy Minister Zahar and her assistant Patricia Boyle. And so they spoke specifically about the united effort to address shortage of childcare resources, spoke again of the 10-year childcare program initiated in 2018, and continue to encourage all school districts to utilize spaces that might be available for total childcare. Also talked about this was new to me, and only probably because I'm a relatively new trustee, but the fact that there are some significant early childhood education bursaries that have been available. They awarded over 1,200 last year, another 1,300, I believe, in the fall. And these are worth $4,000 or $5,000 per semester. So again, a real focus on trying to create education and experience and opportunities for people. And yeah, just really important to continue to recognize this rollout of the before and after school care programs that we think are going to have a huge impact on our district. So thank you. Okay. Moving ahead here, this is, okay. Voila, c'est moi, okay. So this is the BC School Trustees Association Provincial Council meeting, and I think you heard me speak earlier about the opportunity I thought it was to kind of get to feel a deeper understanding of the whole operation of our council and its relationship. There were a couple of motions that came forward, and the one was the continued funding the Student and Family Affordability Fund. This, I learned, that can go through several iterations. There were amendments to the amendment to the amendment. But I did learn that, and I'll just read you this. Basically, the belief was, or concern was, that the Family Affordability Fund would expire on June 20th, 2023. So the call was to again reinstate this because of its significance, and that the permitted uses of the funds be made less restrictive to better be able to serve students and families in need, including the possibility of providing or subsidizing transportation. Started with buses and then recognized that various communities maybe don't always transport through bus. It might be taxi or whatever, and that a portion of the fund be permitted to be used to cover costs of administering, and that the funds be made available to school districts prior to the school start year, so that people could be very mindful in terms of how they allocated those funds. And there was also a motion to fund the exempt staff and compensation. Yeah, I think those were some of the highlights of that particular. And then on to, okay, this is City of Campbell River and School District Liaison meeting. Well, I was pleased to be at actually the table at a recent school district and city joint liaison committee. It's a semi-annual meeting that brings together representative city councilors, in this case, Councillor Tennille Johnson and Councillor Susan Sinnott, along with city senior staff. We recently appointed Elle Graveau, wonderful to see her at the table, and Drew Hadfield, operations, and our own school district representatives, Superintendent Morrow, Secretary Treasurer Patrick, Operations Manager Jason Decksheimer, and myself as Vice Chair. And unfortunately, Chair Kat Eddy would have been a face at the table, but was unable to make it. And of course, we had our very own Natalie Croshaw there to capture our wisdom. The purpose of this committee is to, in a confidential setting, discuss items that are of mutual interest to both the city and the school district, because each group has an opportunity to submit agenda items that keep pace with developments and needs within our community, within our school district, so that we can work in clear partnership to resolve or anticipate the impact one may have on the other, or consolidate resources and work wisely around and intentionally around human and physical resources. It was a chance to explore opportunities, and it was also a chance to kind of look forward to potential efficiencies. In general terms, I would say we all have a better understanding of where growth will be in our community and what impact it might potentially have on our schools. And it's fair to say that we also want to be able to anticipate potential challenge areas so that our approach is proactive and positive. The tone and collaborative nature of the meeting was encouraging because it speaks to our combined efforts to make a difference and serve all of our students, our staff. I don't know if anyone else who was at that meeting would like to add anything further. Sarah, do general strokes, but again, it's a confidential meeting, so yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And then a call for any other business. So I guess that leads us to drum roll. First, Jennifer, are there any questions from the field?
No, there are not.
Okay, and there's our favorite CRDTA representative. Hello, Deborah. Did you have some questions?
I do.
Yes.
Through the chair, perhaps to Mr. Patrick, the administrative staff increase, you said around 4, maybe 5%. Is that simply because of additional resources and some transitions and allocations, or was there an increase salary-wise for administrative staff?
So there was the standard labor settlement increase for all admin staff. That takes up the bulk of it. We did have some transition costs where we had the opportunity to overlap an outgoing and incoming staff member for transition purposes, but we've had interim, we've had what, 3 people in HR in the past year. We've had 3 people in the operations department, and we've had 2 people in the finance department's managers. So where we could do some transition, we did, and we're thankful. It is an extra cost, which we have identified and want to make sure that it's included in the budget. But next year, assuming less or no turnover, we hope that that amount will come back down.
Just a follow up to that one, when you say standard increase, is that the matching of the teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Standard. Okay. Yeah. Again, through the chair to Mr. Patrick. Can you tell me, you didn't indicate what the increased expenses were in the office and communications line? And I'm assuming office refers to the school board office, but I could be wrong.
So the office and communications, the 194, that is the school supply savings. you can kind of see clearly because there's so few internal reserves that have been applied, how they get split up. So some of it'll be school office, some of it'll be classroom supplies, and some of it will be learning resources.
And can you tell me the budget that you had on the screen and that you were referring to, is that the same one that was in the package? Or is there a more updated one, because you said you.
Yeah, there is an updated one. The overall difference between the two, I think, was about $100,000. So from the line items, materially, they're very close. So it hasn't substantially changed the amounts, but we did add some additional costs, which then brought the surplus down and increased the overall costs. And I think I adjusted TTOC up by the wage increase. We kind of had missed that. Two other program costs that have come up mid-year, we added those in. So those were the changes between what was in the document and what we had asked the board to pass today.
So what was passed today, will that be in the minutes of the next board package?
So you get the benefit. This will be posted online very quickly. And yeah, it's also available, I think, through some ministry sites as well, but we'll make it on our site within a couple days.
And again, through the chair to Mr. Patrick, you had mentioned that two groups have been confirmed, two employee groups have been confirmed, but not the third. So that would be QP as teachers have been confirmed, but you don't have the QP money yet, and it's the exempt staff piece that's not.
No, it's actually, they've confirmed exempt, they've confirmed teachers, they haven't confirmed QP yet. So, I actually expect that we'll get that any day now. So, unless there's still some settlement, I believe they extended the deadline, so that might have an impact in delaying that confirmation.
The last question at this time is, you mentioned Beauregard had a higher number. Was the higher number in relation to the ministry number, or did they have a higher number than the 61 that you're projecting?
So they had a higher number than what we're projecting. They were probably in the 80s, high 80s. And like, again, they're looking at trends. We're looking at neighborhoods. We're looking at developments. And if there's the valuable thing that they provide is they know how many kindergarten kids are in, like, next year's kindergarten kids live in our community. They know how many we typically get. But otherwise, we know cohort year to year who's going to move up, and we can track some of that. And their cohort increases were a little optimistic in places, so we scaled that back. But also looking at the ministry numbers, we felt that they were likely missing something, and I think they picked up on a trend in our secondary schools that we hope is different next year. So.
And is there official indications to budget committee coming out to stakeholder groups, because that process does take a bit of time behind the scenes on our part, and I would imagine on the part of QP in that as well. So
Yeah, we can get those out shortly. We've got having it come here, and then we can begin those invitations.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your questions. Is there anything else to come before the board? If we could call for adjournment and